Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the NGA HR webinar, where we talk through our own transformation case study and the change we've gone through and are going through in our own organisation. We can see many people dialing and joining. We've had notice that there's been some connectivity issues and people are talking to each other on LinkedIn to gain the connectivity methods. So if we can just wait for a few minutes just to allow people to join, and then we'll commence the introductions and the presentation and the agenda we're going to cover. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Thanks for joining the NGA HR Transformation Case Study webinar. We can see people joining the GoToMeeting, but there has been some connectivity issues. So we're just waiting a few minutes just to make sure all that can join are joined, and then we'll start the presentation. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the NGA HR case study presentation. We've delayed the start by a few minutes because there were some connectivity issues. I think we've reached a point now where we should actually start the presentation and others can catch up as we progress. The presentation is being recorded and obviously we need to let you know that is occurring. And so the presentation you've joined is an explanation of NGA HR, a global outsourcing and implementation organization's journey in improving its own capability, its own services, and the use of technology to underpin that. And we're going to cover off today the reasons why we had to change, the benefits we sought to achieve, the benefits we actually achieved, the lessons that we learned, and the next very stages of that project. And joining me on the presentation this afternoon, I'm the Account Director for Digital HR Services within NGA HR, Mark Butler. Please look out for me on LinkedIn if you want to discuss this subject further moving forward. Joining me on the call this afternoon is Michael Rogers, Chief People Officer, and he will be covering off most of the discussion today because unfortunately Martin Brockett, our transformation lead, is unable to make it due to illness. So I'll pass over to Michael in the first instance, just to allow him to introduce himself better and properly. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, so as Mark said, I'm Michael Rogers. I lead the people function here at NGA Human Resources. That's the internal people team, or formerly known as HR team. The good news for all participating today is that I'm not a salesperson. I'm not in sales, and in fact, even if I wanted to be in sales, I wouldn't be allowed. And so what I'm going to do today is describe the journey that we've been on internally in terms of our digital HR transformation. So, as Mark said, I'm going to start off with a bit of context, but then really talk about how we went about the project, what we wanted to achieve and what we actually did achieve, and then finish up with some learnings which hopefully you might find useful. And the point for me today is to be very open and share the exact experience that we went through here at NGA. So in terms of where we were 2 years ago, it was a classic cobbler's son situation. And so we had an overly complicated HR technology and process landscape. So starting on the technology side, we had an on-premise HRIS, which we largely used as a headcount tracking tool with some performance management capability, but not real usage of an HRIS in its truest sense. We didn't have much in the way of integration with our payroll engines, and we had a multitude of manual processes, which I'll come to as we go through. On the process side, so from a payroll perspective, for example, depending on which country you were in at the time, payroll was being performed by payroll teams, great, by HR teams, that was okay. In some countries or cases, finance teams, and quite scarily in some places by our sales and consulting division. So a real kind of mix of who was doing what across the function. And so we had a clear need for change, and that's exactly what we set about doing. So, I've mentioned there at a high level where we were coming from, but in terms of, why we needed to change, it was very clear that we needed to untangle this mess of multiple systems and multiple processes and really go for a streamlined landscape that would allow us to do all of the great things on this slide, like transforming the HR function to add more value and better serve our customers, like driving efficiencies within line management and shifting all of the manual administrative type tasks that they were doing into a automated environment or into an HRIS, allowing for self-service and all of those other things. We absolutely wanted integration, and that was integration between our HRIS as well as our payroll systems and in the broader corporate technology landscape, so with our financial systems, for example. We needed to achieve way more in the way of data integrity, quality, and trust of that data. Absolutely wanted to do that. And I guess you can pick your analogy here, but essentially we wanted to drink our own champagne. This is what we did as a business, and we felt like we should absolutely be practicing what we preach, or I've heard people say eating our own dog food. I'll let you choose which one you prefer. But really, it was time for us. It was a real compelling business case, which I'll come to. And so we needed to do something about the situation that we were in. And so that's how Project One HR was born. This was our digital HR project, or a transformation of our HR technology and HR process landscape. And we wanted to go about that with three main objectives. And so the first being, from a technology perspective, we absolutely wanted to simplify our technology landscape and to go from an on-prem system to a cloud platform, which I'll come to. We wanted to reduce HR costs where we could, although that wasn't necessarily a primary driver of the project. And we wanted to simply ensure that the user experience was paramount. And I'll come to that as we get to some of the lessons learned. The second area we want to focus on was the shared service models, or the way in which our processes supported HR and the wider organization, and of course the technology that underpinned those processes. And so what we actually wanted to achieve was a global single shared service, an HR shared service center in one location. And so we decided to put a global shared service center in Kochi, which is what we did. And by doing so, what we wanted to do was improve the quality of experience for our HR function employees and managers, but also look to centralize all of this administration, look for global standards where we could, global processes. And by doing those two things, ultimately, we wanted to improve the quality of HR service and, to use the old cliche, actually allow HR to truly add value. So take away all of this administration and really focus on the value add activity. So what were the intended benefits of going about this? So if we were to achieve those objectives, what were the benefits that we would see? Now, clearly, we wanted to improve self-service, and so have employees able to view their own data, have managers able to initiate their own processes. We wanted them to be able to do all of this via mobile. We wanted managers to be able to navigate the organization in a dynamic way, to see their teams, see the wider organization. We wanted HR to be able to truly drive data-driven decision-making. They needed the data and the insights in order to do that. We wanted to improve our reporting capability and move away from simply having a headcount tracking tool. And we wanted to eliminate all of those manual processes that I've been talking about. And so we knew we wanted to move to the cloud, and we made a decision to go with SuccessFactors. And there were many reasons why we decided to go with SuccessFactors. But first and foremost, it was around functionality, it was around look and feel, it was around user experience, which is why we chose SuccessFactors, but also because of our partnership and because of the fact that much of our wider corporate systems landscape was already in the SAP world. And so it made a lot of sense for us to go down to the SuccessFactors path. Now, I'm not going to explain this slide. I'm going to ask Mark to. Mark, only joking. Hope you weren't sweating too much there. I'm not going to spend too much time going through this slide, but the one thing I did want to highlight and point out here is that the red dotted lines represent manual inputs. And I'm not going to talk, like I say, in too much detail about this slide, but there was and this is our HRIS landscape only, these are HR systems, way too much in the way of manual input in this, and manual interventions and spreadsheets flying around and PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. And so what we wanted to do was move to a really simplified cloud HR environment with SuccessFactors in the center of that, driving all of the other systems upstream, downstream. And that's actually what we set about to achieve. And the way we did that was by simply taking Employee Central, SuccessFactors Employee Central, and planting that in the middle of our HR technology and process environment, and then having Employee Central as the single one-stop shop to drive all of these other various global HR processes that we had. And so taking away the need for multiple different tools and vendors and all that kind of stuff, and driving as much of this through SuccessFactors as we could. And so, starting with Employee Central and then performance and goals, and going all the way across the spectrum to time off. And then the beautiful thing we did from there was to use a piece of middleware or integration software that we have, so that Employee Central would have one point of integration with all of our payrolls. And so we were able to connect Employee Central to what we call HR Exchange. And from there, we would have all of our various payrolls from across the world connected in. And so Employee Central truly became, for us, that single source of truth, that master to the slave of all these other systems. And then in order to support that environment, we have HR X Access, which is essentially a ticketing system, and that is underpinning our service center, and that's how our service center interacts with our technology landscape. And so, to pause on this slide for a second, this was the landscape that we set about to achieve. So just to repeat on this point, we have Employee Central, SuccessFactors at the center, then driving all of the various HR modules within SuccessFactors that our HR function, employees and managers would interact with, and then that integration, that connectivity to all of our various payroll engines around the world.
And Michael, I was thinking it might be worthwhile mentioning the SCP. We're not good with acronyms, but the usage of extensions that NGA created to even further use the SuccessFactors product to access other elements.
Yeah, so I've mentioned HR Exit Access, which is our ticketing or our case management system, but something else that we do here at NGA, and I promise I'm not a salesperson, and so I won't start to sell, but we do have apps that we create that kind of sit on top of SuccessFactors and do anything in addition for us, which I would say were unique to NGA. And now when I come to lessons learned, I'll talk a little bit about things that are unique to NGA in this case. But naturally, there are things or ways of working in any company which won't necessarily be readily available in a cloud platform. And so we have something called Extend HR, which allows us to build on top of SuccessFactors and integrate into any other systems that we want, or join up any of the processes within SuccessFactors. And so that's what that's about. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit, well, quite briefly, about some of the benefits achieved. And thankfully, they're similar to what we set out to achieve at the beginning of the project. But suffice to say, you know, I'm going to call out a couple of the ones on this slide, but I'm also going to talk about some of the benefits that we didn't necessarily expect. And so first and foremost, you know, employee experience. Now, 2 years ago, employee experience was a phrase that people were talking about. It was probably considered a bit of a buzzword, but we had no idea exactly what the revolution behind employee experience would see. And actually, whilst we clearly had user experience as one of our you know, objectives as we set out on this project, as we went through, we saw that the more we involved employees in the design of our landscape, the benefits paid off tenfold further down the line. And one example would be around employee self-service. So, you know, I've heard on countless occasions employees asking, you know, what's this mysterious data? What are these dirty secrets that HR hold on us? Well, in actual fact, the moment we gave employee self-service to our organization and we opened up that data and gave that visibility, all of a sudden the mystery had gone. Employees could see what this mysterious information was that was held on them. They could even change it. They even owned it. And so a huge benefit came from that self-service factor. You know, on the HR side, having the ability to pull meaningful data reports and, you know, interpret that data to drive data-driven decisions is absolutely the case now. You know, I'm probably one of the things I'm most proud about in terms of this project is the fact that my HR organization are now sitting in their meetings with their leadership teams with data at their fingertips and actually backing up the points they're making with data, challenging managers, giving insights, you know, huge benefit. I think another one was GDPR. So again, 2 years ago, obviously we were aware of what was coming, but as we progressed, and I'm not going to use the word luck, although some people would accuse us of that, we hadn't necessarily prioritized at the beginning of the project GDPR as something we were putting as a paramount objective. But by doing this and by moving to the cloud and by deploying Employee Central, we were GDPR ready pretty much from the get-go without even having that as a primary objective. So that was a huge benefit. Another piece was around the reduction of HR costs. And now, you know, when we set about this project, HR cost reduction was not a primary driver. But, you know, through the deployment of a cloud HR system, as well as being, as well as that underpinning the move to a global shared service center, the headcount reduction within the HR function has been significant. And I mean, down from around 120 HR individuals supporting 8,000 employees down to where we are today at 70 HR individuals. And that has primarily come from the move of all of this administration to a shared service center. And as we did that, we cleaned our shop. So we removed all of those manual processes. We allowed for employee self-service and manager self-service. And this has all contributed and resulted in a reduction of the amount of manual inputs and manual administration that takes place anywhere in the organization. So that's from within HR as well as employees and managers, and through the streamlining of our systems and processes completely removed it. And so that's how we achieved such a significant reduction in HR headcount. Plenty of other benefits achieved, and as Mark said, we're more than happy to talk through any of those at length, but for the sake of time, I will keep going. In terms of lessons learned, so I think one of the biggest ones, and you would perhaps have expected NGA to be experts in doing this to themselves, given this is what we do as a function, but actually what I found as, you know, leading the HR or people function through this was that NGA were typical and in many respects and like any other client. And so first, for example, you know, having the HR function find that balance between being able to get on with their day jobs, but at the same time dedicate as much time as necessary towards this project. And of course, we achieved that, but it wasn't something that we could walk into with our eyes closed. That took careful planning. business process needs to be aligned with technical functionality. And what I mean by that is, be clear and on your guiding principles when starting out. This is what I found. I took the approach of NGA is not special. We're not niche. We don't need to have all this unique customization, tailorization. Give it to us as it is, off the shelf. We will use this as an opportunity to remove all of the manual stuff that we had come up with over the years. Now, of course, that's, in my opinion, the right approach to take. Others have a different view. But the balance, there was a delicate balance to be found because, of course, and as I was referring to earlier, there are often things that do take place which simply can't be standardized. And so a learning for me personally was, whilst that was a great approach in principle, we had to be a little bit flexible about letting some of that uniqueness, let's call it, of a company be factored into the solution that you land upon. Another learning here was just how key change management was. And so, for example, we encountered resistance from the HR function, which, I'd expected some of, but not perhaps as much as I had. And that resistance came from certain members of the HR function who, quite naturally were uncertain. They perhaps were in their comfort zone with some of the more administrative tasks that would disappear and dissolve. And so the key there was really to keep on hammering home the benefits of what we were doing and demonstrating to them the value that this would add and helping them to know how they would fill that void, how to reinvent themselves. And so that was key. Systems do not like uncleansed data. I think that is an understatement. And so, again, a huge learning here for me was garbage in, garbage out. Do not let garbage go into your new environment because you quickly end up back at square one. And I'm not saying we did that, but what I would say is we underestimated the importance and time spent required in cleansing our own data. Now, of course, that won't be the case for everybody, but I'm, as I said, I was going to be completely open on this call. That was one of the biggest learnings for us. And then the final one in terms of a learning was not to be so precious again around scope. And so, if you talk to any project manager, you might hear the phrase scope creep, and quite rightly. However, as we went through this journey, new things came up, and my learning was, as a function, let's not be precious about the scope that we set out to achieve. Let's hear new functionality as it comes in and let's go with it. And actually, I'm just going to spend a moment talking about that. So, for example, around 9 months ago, our employees took a vote and they decided that they no longer wanted an annual performance management process. Surprise, surprise. They didn't want performance ratings anymore. Our managers didn't want calibration anymore. Our managers didn't want the forced distribution, to use their terminology, the bell curve, all that good stuff. And so actually, as we went through this transformation, we realized that by having moved to such a simple cloud platform, it was very agile. It was very easy for us to then take the annual performance management process that we had built, which was typically a once-a-year event or a biannual event, and simply through some very minor changes to the way in which we had deployed the performance and goals module, we were able to straight away move to a continuous performance management process. And I can absolutely say, had we been in our old environment, there's no way we would have been able to respond so quickly and so effectively to something that our business was asking us to do. We've so far seen success. We do have our reward cycles coming up, so fingers crossed they'll all go smoothly, but so far so good. And that was absolutely down to the new environment that we found ourselves in. So I think I'm going to finish on some takeaways. These are by no means all of the takeaways, but these are the ones that perhaps it's worth drawing attention to today before we open up to discussion and questions. The first one would be stay focused on the bigger picture. And by that, what I mean is don't allow yourselves to be taken down rabbit holes and get obsessed around shiny buttons and really specific pieces of functionality. Remember what you're trying to achieve. Remember what the value is that you're trying to add by doing this. I can't stress enough how over investing in change management is so important. If you want your project to be a success, then that would probably be one of my biggest recommendations, is really invest in change management, all the way from at the beginning, stakeholder impact analysis, all the way through to communications, training, change ambassadors, all that good stuff. the more the better, in my opinion. The devil is in the data, for sure. As I said, garbage in, garbage out. Please do take the opportunity to get that right up front. And then lastly, I think, and I pretty much just touched on it in the previous couple of slides, don't be precious over scope, be agile, adapt as new needs come, because absolutely the functionality is most likely out there ahead of what you want to be doing as a business. So Mark, I think I'm going to pause there. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to cover or anything that I missed.
No, I don't think so. I think that covered all the points I think that needed to be made. And our marketing colleague Scene's on the call. I think we'd like to open now to questions from the floor. If anybody's got anything they'd like to ask of us.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Everyone, you can send in your questions via the chat, or you can unmute your lines and ask the questions normally direct to our speakers. We'll just wait a few seconds.
And also, seeing what I've found, having done these before, is that questions via LinkedIn come in, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So if anybody wants to fire a question over on LinkedIn, then by all means, please do so.
Thanks, Michael. Let me see. Michael, I have a question coming in from Manuel de Loof, who's asking, how long did this journey take, and what did you do with the unions, workers, councils, etc.? Can you give him a little bit of your expertise there?
Yeah, I can. So, I guess in terms of how long this took, the deployment of Employee Central and Performance and Goals was, relatively speaking, quite quick. So I think we did that in around 4 months. We probably could have gone faster, but we certainly wanted to get things right from a data perspective, as I mentioned. And so the deployment of Employee Central and Performance and Goals was around 4 months. And then actually from there, things rapidly accelerated. And so recruiting and LMS and compensation, these things felt like they were pretty much being switched on as we went further. So, from 2 years ago when we started out and to now, that's been a journey sort of going module by module. So, 3 or 4 months for Employee Central, and then the rest followed suit. Works councils are very interesting. So, depending on which works council we're talking about, some were very open to this. Some had been crying out for this for a while. Some had concerns, for example, around data and where would the data be stored. And of course, the data is stored in Europe, which was fine. Ironically, we probably had the most resistance from our German Works Council, and obviously SAP being German, made me smile, but for the absolute right reasons. So the German Works Council were very interested in security and how we would protect the data. But overall, all of our works councils were supportive of this. Employees having visibility and access to their data was a huge selling point for the works councils. Having a set of processes which were all within a tool rather than all these Excel spreadsheets that were flying around. All of this really helped us to position this in the right way with the works councils. Of course, there were plenty of learnings, and I'm happy to share those with anyone in more detail in terms of how we interacted with our works councils. But I guess we're lucky in NGA that our works councils are always on side and wanting to do what's right for employees as well as the business.
Okay. All right. I have much more questions coming in at the moment. Payroll integrations with SuccessFactors. Is it integrated with SAP payroll systems, others too? How does it work? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that varies. We have multiple different payroll engines across our organization, but what we do is we have our own IP actually in this case, a system which used to be called PEX, which is now called HRX Exchange, and essentially, you know, from our North American employee population, which have a SAP-based payroll system, all the way through to Philippines, which uses a system called Proceda, UK, which uses a payroll engine called ResourceLink. All of this was perfectly capable of being connected via our middleware, the PEX system that I'm referring to. So to answer the question, not all of those payrolls were SAP based.
Okay. Another question that we got was, what was the size and organization of your transformation team to achieve this One HR project?
Very small and nimble is what I'd say. And it's a shame that Martin isn't able to join the call, because I'm sure he'd be really emphasizing the fact that it was a small team. But essentially, we had a program director in Martin Brockett himself. He drove the change program. And within that, there was a team of around 4 consultants that were pretty much full-time dedicated to the project. But of course, that was ranging from all of the SuccessFactors deployment, as well as the integration to our payrolls and some of the other systems that we integrated to as we went through this. Now, that flexed up and flexed down at certain times, but that was generally the size of the project team.
Okay. Another question. Did you go live with Manager Self-Service and Employee Self-Service at the same time as you went live with Employee Central?
Yes, we did. So we decided to go big bang, all 34 countries with Employee and Manager Self-Service functionality from day one. We did, however, not limit, but we certainly did the functionality in phases. So from day one, employees were able to go in and access their own personal data, make changes to things like home address or bank details and all that kind of stuff. And from day one, managers were able to go in and raise requisitions once the recruiting module was ready. One of the earliest things we allowed managers to do, which sounds pretty frightening, but we had our reasons, was allow managers to initiate termination processes. So in the event that an employee had resigned, rather than have that manual almost conversation between a manager and HR to say so-and-so has resigned, we created a process which allowed a manager to go straight in and notify the HR and payroll function of that resignation, and put in the reason that the employee was saying they were resigning, and remove HR as the middle person from that process. So again, to answer the question, yes, employee and manager self-service from day one, but that functionality evolved over time as the modules did. So as we went live with talent, as we went live with recruiting, as we went live with compensation, all of that functionality increased.
Okay. In addition to the continuous performance functionality, are you still using performance review forms? How do you collate the reward information and pass this to payroll?
Yeah, so the way in which we've approached continuous performance management is still in the start of a year, employees have goals. And so employees enter their goals and managers agree their goals and all that good stuff. Where we go from there is a non-specified amount of interactions throughout a year, whereby we're asking employees to meet with their managers and have check-ins, which are focused on development and focused on feedback. And they're capturing that development conversation and capturing that feedback in a form, but what they're not doing is capturing a rating. And what we found is that means the conversation is way more rich and focused on development, rather than, whereas before, if you knew you had to get to a rating, the rating that a manager had decided they were going to give in their head stipulated the tone and nature of the conversation. And so, yes, there are forms to capture those conversations, but those forms do not result in a rating. And to go to the second part of the question, in terms of the link to reward and payroll, what we actually have done is take away ratings, but make a situation where managers are making broader, more holistic decisions. So, naturally they will still need to take a view on performance, and that's because we have a pay for performance culture within NGA. We reward people for high performance, but they're not obsessed by that rating, and they don't need to calibrate that rating, and they don't need their VP or their SVP to sign off that rating. And that view of performance is just one piece of a broader decision, and that is a view of how somebody's doing against their goals, but it's also, how have they responded to feedback as they've been through the year? Number 2, what's their package like in comparison to the market? Number 3, what's their package like in comparison to their peers? Number 4, what behaviors have they demonstrated? So, but this is all, less about ratings and more about managers using their view. And we are not capturing that. We are allowing managers, we are trusting managers to make those decisions. Of course, we are putting safeguards in place to spot any kind of bad practice, but this was all based on moving to an environment where we trust our managers to do the right thing. We're going through this process. I'm sure there'll be learnings along the way, and again, I'll be happy to share those. But I guess, to answer the question of reward, we go from a reward decision being simply made on a performance rating to a reward decision being made across a variety of different factors.
Okay, Sabrina, I hope you've, it's Julia, I hope you have now an answer to your question. Paolo would like to understand a bit more, what is the integration technology behind the HRX tool to integrate payroll from multiple countries to Employee Central? A bit technical, Michael, we're going to test you now. Eh?
Well, I think I'm going to fail that test because what I prefer to do is have someone from our technical team follow up on that question, because what I don't want to do is give a convoluted or waffling answer. I think it's best that we refer that to the experts.
Okay, we'll do that. We're halfway the list of questions. A question from Ingrid. She asks, how did you start cleaning the data? As I can imagine that you must have tons of data. How did you manage this cleaning and transition the new systems and safeguard the quality of your data entry?
Yeah, so a few things went into that. One of the key things that we did was create a freeze period prior to go live, and so we gave ourselves some breathing space to say to the HR organization, with the support of the payroll organization, there is going to be a period of a month between data cutoff and go live where it's all on you to go out to all of the HR people across the organization, all of the payroll teams, and validate these key fields. Now, we didn't try to cleanse all fields. We actually were selective, and we decided there were certain data fields that we didn't need anymore. So the first thing we did was remove those. But then of those key fields that we did feel needed to be cleansed, we basically said to our HR organization, set aside a decent amount of time in this period, because in that period, you are going to spend your lives making sure that the data that goes in is the right data. And that worked really well. I'm not sure that would work well for all organizations, but for us, having a 4-week freeze period and having built into the HR calendar that period, which meant that there was less going on for our HR function at that time, really allowed them to get into looking at payroll data, comparing that with the HRIS data, looking at FTE data, making sure we had all our bonus percentages right, all that kind of stuff. And that worked for us.
Okay. Prashant would like to know the employee scope and the number of countries in which Employee Central is deployed in 4 months.
So there were 8,000 employees in scope and 34 countries.
Okay. Jill would like to know if we used a system integrator or do we have our own in-house capability?
We have our own in-house capability. Yeah. And I'm sure Mark is itching to follow up on that question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that prompt.
Then a question from Suyacha. I hope I I pronounced your name correct. Apologies. Are you using Employee Central Global Benefits, or are you using another provider for managing benefits administration?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's on our roadmap, but we are not currently using Global Benefits. We have various tools in different countries, but that's certainly something we're looking at right now.
Yeah, okay. Then someone says, the devil is in the data. Did you set up any particular process to ensure data consistency and accuracy?
Yeah, yes, we did. But again, I don't think I'm the right person to go into exactly how that process worked. But for sure we did. And one of the things we did do is take one of our own employees who we have in our Kochi center in India, and we dedicated them to this project for a period of time in order to manage that process. But absolutely, you know, you have to get the resource right for something like that.
Okay, thanks. I think we went through all the questions. If there are more questions, we'll give you 1 more minute to ask them. In the meantime, Sabrina says, Michael, thank you. I'm so happy with the answers to my question. Thanks. Sujatha as well, thank you. So if anyone has questions, you still have some time to ask them now, or you can connect with Michael on LinkedIn and ask him directly your questions. Let us check for a few seconds. Yes, a last question. Which reporting tool do you use for cross-functional reporting between Employee Central and payroll and time data?
So we use a tool called Business Objects.
Yeah, okay. All right, I hope, Manuel, this is what you expect.
You know, that was SAP Business Warehouse, but we have evolved that to Business Objects. That's the tool we're using.
Okay, and what is the archiving tools that you used?
Archiving in terms of employee files, if that's the question, then we're actually using one of our own products at the moment, but we do have a archiving or employee file tool called PeopleDoc on our roadmap, PeopleDocs, which will be deploying soon. If that wasn't the question, I apologize.
Okay. And how many languages did we support?
At the outset, we went with English, Spanish, French, Italian, and German. And since then, we've switched on a few other languages, but that's how we started.
And Sujatha also asked if we can provide an insight in historical data. How much did you migrate?
We can do that, but I think that's one we'll probably take offline.
Yeah, okay. All right. I think we answered all questions.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. By the volume of questions, hopefully it seemed to resonate with the audience. As Michael has alluded, we're more than happy to carry on the conversation, both from a lessons learnt point of view, more detailed point of view, but equally, as per the SI question that Michael joked with me on, you know, NGA HR wants to summarize, have implemented and transformed data and changed the processes of our own organization, like we do very much for many organizations around the world, using SuccessFactors as a technology to underpin that. So if what one lesson of today is how the skills that we have, how they can potentially add value to your organization, equally feel free to reach out to myself on LinkedIn. I am a salesperson, but I promise I will be gentle, I will be consultative, and thank you very much for your time. We look forward to more conversation. Michael, thank you very much for that intuitive and valuable insight. That was very, very much appreciated and a great way of covering the subject. Thank you all.
Thank you for everyone who joined.
Thank
you
you
very much.